Welcome back to KARK 4 News at 4. Joining us today is John DiPippa, Dean Emeritus of the Law School at William H. Bowen School of Law in Little Rock. We're talking more, of course, about the news today that came out of this ruling, Roe v. Wade. I know that you have been studying this in depth. Can you just tell us a little bit about what exactly is in this ruling? What does it cover?
Okay, so what this ruling said is that the right to choose an abortion is no longer a fundamental right. And what that means is it gets no special protection from the United States Constitution, and it frees the states to regulate it or prohibit it pretty much as they see fit. And in doing that, they overruled Roe v. Wade and Planned Parenthood v. Casey, which had held that abortion was a fundamental right.
And of course, the attitude and climate of the actual Roe v. Wade decision versus today, I'm sure, is very different. Can you talk about how things have changed from that first decision to what we're facing today?
Well, what's interesting is that that first decision was a 7-2 decision. And there were Republican appointees who were in the majority. And so the first thing you notice is that today we have split pretty much along party lines, even in the United States Supreme Court, and that wasn't true in 1972. The other thing that's different is that initially Roe was not a very big political issue. And in fact, it wasn't until 1980 that the Republican platform actually said anything about abortion. Prior to that, the party was more or less in favor of it. And so the big difference today is that it's now a really hot political issue, and it was not so hot in 1972.
And of course, when we're talking about it being a political issue, we've seen in Arkansas that it has been sort of one of our main focuses. Specifically, we have a trigger law in place, one of 13 states, that if this was ever overturned, then that would enact here. Can you talk a little bit more about what exactly is that and what do we need to know today?
Well, what that law does is it said if Roe is ever overturned, once the Attorney General of Arkansas certifies that that happened, abortion is illegal in the state of Arkansas for almost every reason. And the only exception is if a woman's health is in physical danger or her life is in physical peril. It's the only exception. And so from this moment on, abortion is, for all practical purposes, illegal in Arkansas.
As of today. And of course, there are some penalties that go along with that law for those who try to perform an abortion. There have been some questions about who faces those penalties, whether it's the providers or the women themselves. Can you clarify that?
Sure, only the providers, and that's true in most states. Most states that have either these trigger laws or have regulated abortion choose not to punish the woman who seeks the abortion, but rather the provider. And at least currently, that's the law in Arkansas. Now, there is another exception in the law that's interesting, and that is that it says that it does not apply to anything that prevents a pregnancy prior to when the fetus is implanted in the womb. So, for example, Plan B contraception, under this current law in Arkansas, is still legal. Now, the legislature could change that if it wanted to, but at least now that's another option that is still available.
And speaking of changes, if there were any changes that needed to be made to this law, or if legislators in the future wanted to make, how easy would it be for that to be implemented?
Well, it's as easy as passing a law. I mean, it seems to me that that's not a very high bar, because the way the court has described this right, the state only has to have a rational basis to enact any regulation of abortion. And protecting fetal life, according to the majority today, is a rational basis. So that means the state can completely ban abortion. Now, there's still an open question whether that means that it could ban an abortion even if the pregnancy would, say, cause a woman serious harm or death. There's still an open question whether a state could go that far.
Okay, and I'm sure this is something that we'll continue to cover. Of course, this is just kind of the first day, but thank you so much, John, for joining us and answering some of those basic questions.